The phone buzzed at 11:47 at night, and she almost didn't look. She was lying in the dark, one arm thrown over her eyes, the kind of tired that isn't about sleep at all. Her thumb hovered over the screen, almost swiped it away. But something made her turn it over instead, and there it was, just a title, nothing dramatic, sitting quietly on the screen, like it had been waiting for her specifically. She didn't know why she pressed play. She just did. And that was the moment before everything else in this story. My beloved child, before you found this message tonight, you thought you were only looking for something to get you through until morning. But I brought you here for more than that. I am not promising you that every circumstance in your life will look different by sunrise. I am telling you that tonight can change the way you walk into tomorrow, and that is not a small thing. That is the beginning of everything else. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I think you've been waiting for the wrong kind of proof. Not your job, not your marriage, not the stack of bills on the counter, or the results you're still waiting to hear back on. Underneath all of that, there is something older, something that has to move first before any of the rest of it can hold. Tonight, I want to show you several quiet ways I begin changing a life. Not the loud ways, the ways that happen in kitchens, in parked cars, in the 10 seconds before someone decides whether to forgive or to walk away. Here is the first one, and it might surprise you, because it has nothing to do with what you can see. Have you noticed that life tends to change long before anyone can actually see it moving? There is no announcement, no thunder rolling in over the house. It simply begins, quiet as a root pushing through packed soil, and by the time you notice anything at all, it has already been working for weeks. Think of a man sitting at his kitchen table tonight, turning his phone over and over in his hand, wondering if his son is ever going to call him back. He has no idea that in a few hours, that same son will sit on the edge of his own bed, phone lit up in the dark, finally working up the nerve to say 2 words he has swallowed for 2 years. I'm sorry. The father doesn't know it's coming. It is already on its way to him. Think of a woman falling asleep tonight, convinced that nothing in her life is moving anywhere. She has no idea that tomorrow afternoon, at a grocery store she almost didn't stop at, she will run into someone who reshapes the next 10 years of her life. Not always romance. Sometimes it is a mentor. Sometimes it is one sentence from a stranger that reorganizes everything she believed about herself. She does not know yet, but I do. This is how I work most of the time. Not with fireworks, with roots. I say this because I think you have been standing at the edge of your own field, looking at what appears to be nothing but dry, cracked ground, wondering if I have forgotten what you planted there. You have not seen movement in weeks, maybe longer, and I understand why that silence has been hard to carry, but a seed does not announce itself while it is splitting open underground. It does that part in the dark, on purpose, because that is the only place it can do it safely. What looks like nothing to you might be the exact place I am working the hardest. I know patience has not been easy for you. I know there have been nights you have asked the same question more times than you can count, and heard nothing back but the sound of your own house settling around you. I am not going to pretend that silence does not hurt. It does. What I am asking you to consider is that silence and absence are not the same thing. A door that has not opened yet is not the same as a door that was never going to open. Tonight, I want to walk you through the first 2 of those quiet ways, because I think you have already lived through pieces of them without knowing what to call them. The first change is what you begin to notice. The second is something you might have mistaken for me leaving, when it was actually the opposite. Here is what I have seen, over and over, in people who came to me asking for change. They wait for the ending. They want the harvest, so they walk straight past the planting without recognizing it. They want the finished house, so they panic the moment the walls come down, not realizing the walls coming down was always the first part of the plan. And later, sometimes years later, they look back and say, I wish I had known that was you. I wish I had trusted the process instead of resenting it. I do not want that for you. I do not want you standing here a year from now, realizing that tonight was where something began, and you missed it because you were listening for something louder. So stay with me a little longer, not because I need your attention, because some part of you, underneath the tiredness, already suspects that tonight is different. That part of you is right. Let's start with the first thing I change in a person. It is never the circumstance first. It is always something quieter than that, and almost no one expects where I begin. There were two women who lost their jobs on the same morning. Same company, same round of layoffs, same email arriving at 9 o'clock with the same careful corporate language wrapped around the same bad news, same severance folder, same walk out to the parking lot, each of them carrying a cardboard box with a desk plant leaning sideways and a coffee mug rattling against a stapler. One of them sat behind the wheel and cried for 20 minutes, and then drove home and spent the next 3 weeks convinced her life had ended in that parking lot. The other one cried too, if we're honest, because losing a job stings even when you saw it coming. But somewhere in that same 20 minutes, sitting in the same gray lot, staring at the same chain-link fence, something else moved in her. She thought, maybe this is the push I've needed for 6 years and never had the courage to give myself. Same layoff, same morning, same box in the same back seat. Two completely different lives waiting on the other side of it. This is the first change, and almost no one expects it, because almost no one asks me for it. When people come to me, they ask for the same things first. Change my job, change my marriage, change my body, change the number in my bank account. I understand why. Those are the things you can see. Those are the things that keep you up at night. The numbers on a screen, the quiet at the dinner table, the mirror you've learned to avoid. But I want to tell you something about how I actually work, because it will save you a great deal of frustration if you understand it now instead of 5 years from now. I almost never start with the circumstance. I start with the eyes. Think about washing a window. You spend 20 minutes on it, streaks everywhere, a pile of used paper towels on the sill, and finally the glass goes clear. Here is the strange part. The backyard did not change. The tree is still the same tree. The fence is still leaning the same way it's been leaning since the storm 3 years ago. Nothing out there moved an inch. The only thing different is that now you can actually see it. That is what I mean when I say the first change always happens inside, before anything on the outside moves at all. I know you want the outside to move first. I know it feels like proof, like evidence that I am listening, when the job offer finally comes through or the phone rings with good news. But if I change your outside before I change how you see, you will simply build the same trouble again with new furniture. New job, same fear driving every decision underneath it. New relationship, same old wound running the show. I am not interested in giving you a different version of the same problem. I am interested in giving you new eyes to walk into whatever comes next. There is an old story about a man named Moses. Before he became the person history remembers, he was a man with a flock of sheep and a complicated past he was still running from, out in the middle of nowhere, on an afternoon that started exactly like every other afternoon before it. And then he saw a bush on fire that would not burn up. It did not turn to ash. It simply kept burning, steady and strange, refusing to be consumed. Here is what most people miss about that story. The fire was not really the point. Right before anything remarkable happens, there is one small sentence tucked into the text that almost everyone reads past. It says, "He turned aside to look." He could have kept walking. People walk past strange things every day, too tired, too busy, too used to explaining things away before they've even looked closely. But he stopped. He turned his head. He paid attention to something unusual, instead of dismissing it as heat and dust playing tricks on tired eyes. That turning of the head is the first miracle in that whole story. Before there was a plague, before there was a sea splitting open, before there was a nation walking out of slavery into a wilderness, there was one man deciding to actually look at what was right in front of him instead of walking past it out of habit. I do not change Pharaoh first. I change Moses first. I do not change your boss first, or the people who hurt you, or the years you cannot get back. I change what you notice. I change what you are willing to turn toward, instead of walking past out of exhaustion or fear, or habits that stopped serving you a long time ago. So if you have been waiting for your circumstances to prove that something is happening, check something else first. Have you started noticing things you used to walk right past? Has a conversation that would have wrecked you 6 months ago somehow not landed the same way this time? Have you caught yourself pausing, actually pausing, before reacting the way you always react? That is not nothing. That is the window getting cleaner. That is the first change, the one that has to happen before any of the others can hold. Before I change your path, I change the eyes that are going to walk it. A person with new eyes and an old life will, in time, build a new one. But a person with a new life and the same old eyes will eventually wreck it all over again, just in a different room. There is a second change I make, and it tends to arrive right around the same time as the first. Almost everyone misreads it completely. They think it means I have gone quiet. They think it means the opposite of what it actually means. Stay with me. I want to show you why things might be feeling harder right now instead of easier, and why that discomfort could be the clearest sign yet that something real is already underway. I want you to picture an old house, the kind with good bones and bad everything else. The people who bought it walked through the front door the first time, saw the crown molding still intact, the original hardwood under decades of grime, the big windows facing east, and fell in love with what it could become. Then the contractor showed up Monday morning with a sledgehammer. If you had walked into that house on Tuesday, you would not have called it progress. You would have called it a disaster. Dust everywhere, a wall gone, completely gone, wiring hanging out of the gap like something wounded. Plaster dust settled into every seam in the floor. If nobody had told you what was coming, you would have said this house is worse off now than before they ever touched it. But the couple who bought it did not panic, because they knew something the mess could not show them. That wall coming down was never a setback in the renovation. The demolition was the renovation. You cannot build the open, sunlit kitchen they wanted with that wall still standing in the way. It only looks like ruin because you cannot see the drawing the contractor is working from. I tell you that because I think you have been standing in some version of that house lately, staring at the dust and the torn-out wiring, wondering if I walked off the job halfway through, wondering if you misunderstood what I said to you back when this all started, wondering if this was ever really going anywhere at all. Here is something I need you to hold on to tonight, because it will keep you from quitting 2 weeks before that wall was always going to come down anyway. Discomfort is not proof that I have left. Sometimes it is the clearest proof that I am closer than I have ever been, doing the one part of the work you would never choose for yourself if I handed you the option. A doctor cleaning a wound does not enjoy that part any more than you do. Nobody likes the sting of it, but a wound closed over dirt gets worse, not better. And the discomfort now is what keeps something far worse from setting in later. The pressure a potter presses into wet clay is not punishment either. It is how the air pockets get worked out before the kiln finds them the hard way. Both of those, the wound and the clay, are the same lesson wearing different clothes. The hard part now is often what makes the whole thing able to hold together later. There is a man in an old story who understood this better than almost anyone, though it took him falling apart completely to learn it. His name was Peter, and on the worst night of his life, he denied 3 times, out loud, to strangers standing around a fire, that he even knew the man he loved most in the world. That kind of collapse looks like the end of a person. It felt like the end of him. He walked away from that fire and wept in a way that changes how a man carries himself for the rest of his life. But it was not the end. It was the demolition before the rebuild, the wall coming down before the kitchen anyone could actually live in. The same man who could not say he knew his own friend 3 times in one night became the one who stood in front of thousands of people not long after and did not flinch once. Nobody could have told him, in the middle of his worst night, that the collapse was construction and not ruin. He only understood it looking backward, the way most people do. I am not telling you this so you'll make peace with pain for its own sake. I am not asking you to pretend it doesn't hurt when a wall comes down in your own life. Whether that wall is a marriage ending, or a plan falling apart, or a version of yourself you finally have to let go of. It hurts. I am not going to insult you by pretending otherwise. What I am asking is only this. Before you decide the mess means I have abandoned the project, consider the other possibility first. Consider that the dust on your floor and the wiring hanging out of your wall might mean I am closer to the middle of the work than you think, not further from the beginning of it than you feared. Don't mistake construction for destruction. From inside the house, they can look almost identical. The difference is what happens next, and whether you trust the one holding the blueprint, even when all you can see is the mess he's standing in the middle of. Because here is the truth about all this rebuilding happening in the rooms of your life you cannot fully see yet. It does not stay hidden forever. There are signs, small ones, the kind most people walk straight past because they are still waiting for something bigger, something with more noise in it, something closer to the miracle they had already pictured in their heads. I want to show you what those signs actually look like when they show up in your own life, because I think this year has given you more of them than you have given yourself credit for. You didn't yell at your kid the other night. That's the whole moment. No music swelling underneath it, nothing that would make it into anyone's highlight reel. Your kid said the exact thing that would have set you off 6 months ago, same tone, same eye roll, and you felt the old heat rise up behind your ribs for half a second. And then it just passed through you instead of out of you. You took a breath instead of throwing a verdict across the table. You asked a question instead. You probably didn't even notice it happened. You just finished dinner, cleared the plates, went to bed. But I noticed. That half second where you almost snapped and didn't, that is not nothing. That is the harvest of something I have been growing in you for longer than you realize. Here is the truth underneath all of it, and I want you to hear it clearly, because it will help you recognize the rest. The first evidence of real change is rarely something you start doing. It is something that stops running you. Anger stops making your decisions for you. The need to be right stops writing your sentences before you've thought them through. Fear stops getting the final vote on what you say yes to. Comparison stops being able to ruin an entire afternoon over somebody else's highlight reel. None of that requires a miracle. It requires something quieter and slower and much harder to notice while it's happening. I don't usually announce the changes I'm making in you. I don't send a memo. Most of the time you find out I've been at work the same way you notice spring arrived, by realizing one afternoon that you haven't needed a jacket in a week, not by watching the actual moment the season turned. Maybe you have noticed you're forgiving people faster these days, not because what they did stopped mattering, and not because you decided to become a pushover, but because you stopped needing to carry it around as proof of your own righteousness. You let it go, and nobody clapped for you. You just slept a little better that night than you expected to. Maybe you've noticed you're sleeping better in general. Not every night, I know that, but more nights than not. The mind that used to run through every worst case at 1 a.m. has started quieting down a little sooner than it used to. Maybe you've noticed you don't need to win every conversation anymore. There was a season where you would have argued a stranger into the ground over something that didn't even matter, just to prove you weren't wrong. Lately, you've let people believe what they want to believe about you and let it go. Not because you don't care what they think, because you've realized peace is worth more than being understood by someone who was never going to understand you anyway. Maybe you laugh a little easier than you used to, not the polite kind you perform in a meeting, the kind that catches you a little off guard, because you'd forgotten you still had it in you. And maybe, quietest of all, you've started praying before the panic sets in instead of after. You used to only come to me once the fear had already built its whole case and rested it. Now sometimes you catch it earlier. Sometimes you bring me the worry while it's still small enough to hold in one hand. I want to be honest with you. Not every one of these will be true for you tonight. You might recognize 2 of them and not the others yet, and that's all right. This isn't a checklist you need to pass. It's a mirror, and mirrors only show you what's actually there. None of what I just described required a miracle. No say parted for any of it. No fire fell from the sky. And that is exactly why people miss it so often. They are standing in the middle of genuine transformation and looking straight past it, because it didn't arrive wrapped the way they expected. Think about the sun coming up. There's no single instant where night becomes day. There's a long stretch, quiet and slow, where black turns to something less black, then gray, then something you'd almost call blue if you looked closely enough. And by the time you actually notice it's morning, the sun has been rising for the better part of an hour already. The change was happening the whole time you weren't watching closely enough to catch it moving. There's an old list, written a long time ago, describing what it looks like when I've truly taken root in someone. Not miracles performed on a stage. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. Read that list again slowly sometime, and notice that not one item on it needs an audience to be real. That's what I want you to take from tonight. Stop waiting for the version of change that comes with a spotlight attached to it. If you go back honestly through the last several months, not comparing yourself to who you wish you were, just comparing who you are now to who you were then, I think you'll find more evidence than you've been giving yourself credit for. They matter, those small shifts. They're often the clearest proof that I already began the work you've been asking me to start. There's one more thing before you close your eyes tonight, though, because knowing all of this only matters if you know what to actually do with it. Tonight, before you fall asleep, I don't want you to just close your eyes and hope something shifts by morning. I want you to do something small enough to fit into 5 quiet minutes, but real enough to matter. Don't ask me how long. I know that question is sitting closest to the surface tonight. How long until the job comes through? How long until the marriage feels like it used to? How long until the grief gets lighter? Until the waiting finally turns into something you can hold in your hands? I understand why that question keeps circling back around. It's the most natural thing in the world to ask when you're standing in the middle of an unfinished house. But tonight, ask me something different instead. Not how long. Ask me what I'm teaching you. That question changes the whole posture you're standing in. It moves you from a person watching a clock to a person paying attention to a process. And one of those postures leaves you exhausted, while the other leaves you awake to what's actually happening in you and around you. So here's what I'm asking. Nothing complicated, just 5 minutes. Find somewhere quiet. Turn the phone face down or leave it in another room entirely. Let the television go dark. Let the noise in the house settle. The dishwasher, the fan, whatever's humming in the background of your evening. Just for 5 minutes, let it go quiet. Then ask only one question. Say it out loud if you can, or just let it form clearly in your mind if you can't. Father, what are you changing inside me that I haven't noticed yet? Then stop talking. That's the part most people struggle with. because we've trained ourselves to think prayer means talking until we run out of words. Tonight, ask the question, and let there be silence after it. Let the silence feel a little uncomfortable if it needs to. Sit in it anyway. Notice whatever surfaces. It might not be dramatic. It might be a memory from earlier in the week you brushed past too quickly at the time. It might be a name that comes to mind. Someone you need to call. Someone you need to forgive. Someone you've been avoiding without quite admitting it. It might just be a settling in your chest that wasn't there a few minutes ago. Don't require it to be spectacular. Let it be honest instead. If you have a Bible nearby, open it to somewhere quiet, a psalm, and read a few lines slowly, not to check a box. Let the words settle the way water settles once you stop stirring it. And before you sleep, write down one thing you're grateful for. Just one. It doesn't have to be the job or the marriage or the miracle you've been asking for. It can be small. The way the coffee tasted this morning, a text from a friend you weren't expecting, the fact that you made it through a day that felt impossible at 7, and somehow you're still standing here now. Now let me pray this over you before you close your eyes. Father, for the one reading these words tonight, open their eyes to see what you have already been changing in the places they couldn't watch, where they've mistaken waiting for silence. Let them find you were never far, where the walls have come down and left a mess they didn't ask for. Let them trust that you are the one holding the blueprint, even now, even in the middle of the dust. Teach them not to measure your nearness by how fast their circumstances move, but by how much lighter they're carrying what used to control them. Give them the courage to sit in 5 quiet minutes tonight without reaching for the phone to fill the silence. And when they wake up tomorrow, let them recognize even one small piece of what you've already begun. Amen. This isn't about changing me. I don't need convincing, and I don't need you to perform devotion to earn something I already decided to give you. This is for you, so that tomorrow you're not just hoping something happened while you slept. You're paying attention to what's already been happening this whole time, quiet as a root, patient as a season turning. You are not stuck. You are in the middle of something, and the middle always feels the most uncertain, because you can't see the beginning clearly behind you anymore, and you can't see the end in front of you yet. That's exactly where growth happens. Nobody grows in the part of the story that's already finished. Rest tonight. I'm not finished with you. If this reached you tonight, I'd love to know where it found you. Leave a comment and tell me what part of this stayed with you, and if you know someone who needs to hear it too, send it their way. We'll be back with more of these, so stick around if you'd like to keep walking through them together.